Have you seen your electric bill for the month yet? It's probably time for you to tell ComEd that it's just not working out between the two of you. Time for you to switch to solar with Sopel Solar, Sopel, solar.com. Brent Sopel, who played for the Chicago Blackhawks, who helped the Hawks win a Stanley Cup. Brent Sopel is going to help you switch to solar, increase the value of your home, get a 25-year warranty, and start saving money right after installation. It's really easy to do. Set up a consultation, which is all done online at sopelsolar.com. Sopel solar.com. Zero money down. Tax breaks are huge for this. Take control of your finances. For the first time ever, have cost certainty with sopelsolar.com. So this is Car Con Carne. I'm James Van Osdol. And the way this show usually works is I meet a guest in my car outside a Chicago area or suburban area, city restaurant, brew pub, something. But every now and then I'll talk to someone who can't jump into my front seat, who can't share jalapeno poppers and chicken tenders in the front seat, which is why I get to do these things online. My guest tonight is someone from parts that are not Chicago. He is a film director, a documentary filmmaker, Dagan W. Beckett, who chronicles the sad end of the Songbirds Museum in Tennessee in his new documentary, Songbirds. Dagan, lovely to see you. Nice job on the doc.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me on here.
You did such a nice job on it that you've got a Mid-South Emmy to show for it right over your right shoulder?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
You can't miss it. You're very well lit. You being a filmmaker and all, there's the Emmy.
Shamelessly putting it in the shot.
Oh no, if I had an Emmy, I'd be walking with it everywhere. Yeah. I'd be in line at the Culver saying I'd like cheese curds. By the way, I have an Emmy. What do you think about that?
How about that?
So the Songbirds was a museum. It was essentially a shrine to the guitar. This is your first full documentary film. Why this museum? Why Songbirds as your first big leap?
Wow, great question. I guess it was just the film gods telling me it was my time. Maybe I don't know. I've been doing film in some sort for about 6 or 7 years. Before that, I was a professional musician. And so I guess in the arts, I've always kind of been a storyteller. As a musician, a former musician, and as a videographer, cinematographer. Songbirds Museum was someplace that I loved, and I found my zen there. I found my peace. Just being amongst that history of guitars is someplace that was very special to me. It was a place I got to play some really cool guitars. I got to see some really great shows. I got to, video some really cool shows there. I got to shoot some music videos there. It was a home for me. And I found out, like everybody else, that it was closing. And I found out on social media when they announced it, and I was devastated. And honestly, I just felt like it was my responsibility to do something, to document what was there. I hadn't seen anything already. I just couldn't have believed that there wasn't already a documentary film about the largest guitar collection in the world that had already been done. There was a lot of press that had been done on it, but nothing substantial. And so I just called up Johnny, who was the president at the time, and we had a great relationship. And I said, listen, I don't know what I want to do, but I'd like to bring my crew in there and document and film something. I don't know what it is. And he just kind of stopped me mid-sentence and said, absolutely, whatever you need. You just have a week to do it before we close. Oh, man. And so at that point, I'm like, do I really want to do this? And so about 3 days later, I'd gotten my crew together. We'd gotten some sort of plan together in about 2 or 3 days. And we spent one day just filming interviews with all the staff, the crew there. And then what was funny is that day, my now producer, Irv Berner, who's in the film, approached me, and he pulled me into his office. And Irv was working as a curator at the time for the museum. And he said, listen, I don't have any money. I don't have any budget. but would you be willing to follow me around for 3 days and film me giving a tour of this place like I would anybody else? And I said, absolutely. Oh, that would be amazing to do. And that 3 hours turned into a 3 day long shoot for the next 3 days. So we spent about 4 or 5 days there total, filming every inch of the place, all the guitars, all the interviews. We filmed the last show that was there. We filmed the crew walking out for the very last time, very bittersweet moment. And then, about 2 months later, I had my first cut of the film, and that was almost 2 years ago. And here we are.
So again, this is Songbirds. It's a documentary about the Songbirds Museum. Like you said, the largest collection of guitars. The first acquisition they had was the $25,000 purchase of a 54 Fender Strat. I mean, it's a love letter to the guitar, this movie. Yes, it's about this museum. I guess as I started to watch, I was surprised by a couple things. One, this didn't exist as a museum before this.
Correct.
As I'm watching this, I'm like, well, of course there was a need or there was interest in that. But then the second thought I had was, this place only existed for 3 years. Like it seems like you're documenting something that never quite got enough momentum to take hold.
Yeah, that's the sad part about this, is that it really took about 8 years total to flesh out this vision from those who were the architects of this endeavor. It took about 8 years to get all the pieces collected and together to where they were ready to open the doors. And then they were only open for 3 years. And I remember, just talking on the side in the museum, to the staff members, like, they're finally starting to take off. They're starting to see some profits. The live shows were getting packed out. They were having some heavy hitter artists come in to do some shows, and things were really going well. And then, bam, the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And it was one of those things that, like, look, it's costing us, this much still, that we still have to pay our rent every month. And even though nobody's coming, things are shut down, we still have to properly air condition this place. I think they told me the humidity had to be at a certain precise level.
Of course.
The security costs, like, it was just, we can't keep paying for this stuff, and there's just no end in sight. And so unfortunately the decision had to be made, like, listen, we got to close the doors to this place, and the guitars that were there, belonged to other people, and they rightfully so wanted them back because of the pandemic. And so we just got to close it, and they just had to close the doors. So that was the end of the story.
Was it Johnny at the beginning of the movie who said "COVID can go suck one"? That's one of the first lines of the film.
He has since regret saying that, but I think that's one of the best lines in the film, because that sums up what we were all thinking.
Yeah, we still think it. I'm right there with them. What's interesting, we're recording this on August 16th, 2022. It was 2 years ago yesterday they closed their doors.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was it.
Crazy. Again, this is kind of a love letter to the guitar. Yes, you're documenting the end of this museum, and you see the last person walking through there. Like you said, you see them closing shop. But the nerdy music fans in all of us get a thrill out of just hearing all this guitar talk. And there's stuff that I guess was probably common sense, but I like hearing it articulated. The demand that the world saw after the Beatles broke pushed down craftsmanship. Like suddenly there was a period when the electric guitars were shoddier than the 1950s classic heyday guitars. Like the 1970s guitars, maybe not as well made. It makes sense to hear it explained in this movie, but I've never heard it said before.
And I'm really proud of that. How we can for me, the best part about the film was when I was editing this and putting the story together, was I kept thinking about my mom. My mom loves Elvis. I love the Beatles. My mom loves Elvis. But my mom knows nothing about guitar. She knows nothing about the humbucker pickups or or anything like that. And so I wanted to tell a story that someone such as my mom, or a mom, or someone who doesn't know about guitars, could get a message out of this and understand the passion behind it. And you didn't have to be a guitar nerd, but that a film that guitar geeks like myself would just love. And so that's what I'm really proud about, is that we were able to explore, what the Beatles did for the guitar in terms that anyone can understand
Yeah.
and get. And I'm really proud. And Irv, who's in the film and also one of my producers and one of the writers, he did an amazing job just really laying that out. Let's talk about it, before we shot, let's talk about it this way. Let's use this language. Let's not make it too shop talky. Let's make it, like this, so that people can really feel the passion and really understand in layman's terms why the Beatles did what they did for the guitar, why the guitar is like it is.
Speaking of Elvis, this is also the anniversary of Elvis's death as we're
Mm-hmm.
recording this on this day in 1977, 77, August 16th. Just we're commemorating lots of things, lots of unfortunate things as we're talking.
We are, yeah.
It's unfortunate. So the location of the museum, the location of Songbirds, Chattanooga, Tennessee, playing devil's advocate, playing cynic. Did the location hurt the long-term prognosis during COVID? Because when I think of Chattanooga, and I realize you're a Mid-South guy, it's it's what, 5 hours from Memphis, a couple hours away from Nashville. It's not as tourist focused as some of those other big Tennessee cities.
Mm-hmm.
Could that have factored into the
Possibly. I've put a lot of thought into that, actually, and in both discussing it with the visionaries for the museum and then just thinking about it after the fact. One of the reasons they chose the investors chose Chattanooga, and they in the film, it says this in the film, it's just really, it was the cost. Everybody wanted $25,000 a month rent, and it was just not affordable for something like this that's never been done before. The reason they chose Chattanooga is because it was affordable. The rent was affordable. And I think, and I don't know that this is in the film, but really, when you look at Chattanooga, as far as where it's located, it's 2 hours from Atlanta, it's 2 hours from Nashville, 2 hours from Birmingham. It's kind of like a hub that everybody's always coming through, whether they stop in there or not.
right?
They're always driving through there. And so I think their thought process was, well, we'll catch a lot of traffic with people going to Nashville, going to Atlanta, and whatnot. And what was cool about it, and this is not something I really explored in the film, I would have loved to explore this more, but there were several artists like, random people like Kevin Bacon, Jackson Brown, and I think we addressed this in the film, like G.E. Smith, who were just randomly on their way to a show in one of these, these larger cities, and they heard about this museum and they stopped in Chattanooga just to see it and take a tour like everybody else, and there are photos floating around online of those individuals there and stuff. So I think that was their thinking. But at the end of the day, when COVID hit and the whole entertainment industry shut down, obviously someplace like Chattanooga is not going to get the attention that the music city of Nashville is.
For sure. And you talked about the musicians' love for the museum. Joe Bonamassa says at some point something to the effect of, "We'll never see a collection like this ever again."
Mm-hmm.
Like, straight up. If you missed it, that was your chance. There it goes. Which, I mean, I trust what he says. If anyone knows the guitar,
I would say the same thing. There will never be, and it's hard to explain. And really, my goal with the film was to document this in a way to where, the vision of the museum can still live on almost spiritually through this film. That vision can still live on forever through this film. There's never going to be another collection like this in the world. Maybe one day someplace else in the world, who knows? You never say never. But it's just like, it's a one-time thing. Like, it'll never happen again. And a lot of our lifetimes. I hope it does, but hopefully people can kind of still, find a love for that, even if they didn't get there through this film.
Speaking of the artists, you have a lot of people, famous talking heads, talking about Songbirds. I'm guessing you talked about springing into action to film this movie with mere days to go before closing. I'm guessing that getting those artists to talk on camera was fairly time consuming, and you conducted a lot of those after the museum was actually closed.
Yeah. So, you mentioned Joe Bonamassa. That was one of those to where we knew he was coming. We knew he was going to be in New York for a period of like 2 days. Um, and so one of our producers who's in the film, David Davidson, he actually lives in New York, and he's good friends with Joe. And Joe was coming in town for a period of 2 days to visit Dave. And so when we got the call from Dave, like, hey, Joe wants to be in the film. Is there any way you can do this? Yes. Let's get a plane ticket and let's get up there. And
Uh-huh.
then we were filming, we flew from Chattanooga to Long Island. We were up there 24, 48 hours later. I'm there scripting in the plane on my notepad or on my phone the questions for him, and stuff, and kind of, and Irv and I are kind of putting that narrative together. So, and same thing with John Schneider. I mean, John played in 2018, and I had footage of him playing while the museum was open, and we tracked John Schneider down. He was doing a series of things called, I think, Hazard Fest for Dukes of Hazard,
Sure.
which was an experience. And so we had to track him down in the middle of the country doing these things, and he was more than happy to make time to sit down and talk about these guitars. So it was an adventure to say the least, but it was. I mean, who gets to do this for a living? It's amazing, to get to do this, travel the country and interview these artists and these musicians.
So for younger people who are watching or listening, John Schneider, you mentioned Dukes of Hazzard. To another generation, Jonathan Kent on Smallville.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to make it relative
He
to
was he was Jonathan Kent for me. He wasn't Bo Duke. He was more Jonathan Kent for me.
perfect.
Yeah.
I still have a soft spot for that show. I mean, superhero television movies have evolved much since then, but
Yeah.
that was a big deal back
I
in
do.
the
I
day.
have a soft spot for Smallville. I do.
So some of the guitars and people mentioned, I mean, Dick Dale actually played there at the museum.
He did. Hmm.
I mean, that was late in life for Dick Dale.
I think he was if not he was one of the first shows they had at the museum was Dick Dale.
I
Very
mean,
early on.
that has to be, I mean, without even looking, that has to be one of his last shows, last
Hmm.
performances, which
Yeah,
is
I think he passed
unbelievable.
away shortly after that performance.
So it's interesting. I mean, rock and roll to me, the electric guitar to me is rock and roll. I don't get a rock and roll feel, not for anything good or bad. I just don't feel rock and roll. I feel more that kind of roots of rock and roll and country vibe. Is that what the museum was
It
originally?
wasn't. It really wasn't. A lot of the artists that were in the film were simply artists that we had access to, either through footage that was shot while it was open, or footage that we were able to capture after the fact, from the artists who made themselves available. We had great footage of Marty Stewart, singing in the film and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But um, if you were the way the museum was laid out, which was cool, it was laid out um, in a timeline. So right when you walked in, it was a 1950s section, and then it transitioned to the 60s, and then the 70s section, and then you had your green room and your vault and all that. And so when you were there, you got mostly like an early 50s vibe, a rock
Mm-hmm.
vibe there, than anything. But they were always changing out displays and showcases. So I think one time, at one point, they were doing women in rock. They did a
Mm-hmm.
showcase in that. They had Sheryl Crow, Bonnie Raitt guitars there that they had played and stuff. So they were always changing it out and stuff. But it had a good mix of the country, the early rockabilly, um, stuff. It was a little bit of everything, but you didn't really get like one genre over another while you were there.
Cool. I mentioned that first acquisition, the $25,000 54 Fender Strat. You were filming, you had a crew there, you were embedded in Songbirds for a week. What did you totally geek out over?
Oh man, I'm so glad you asked me that. I was hoping you would ask me this question. I'm a left-handed guitar player. Paul McCartney's my man. And so for me, it's a little harder just picking up a guitar and playing it. The museum had this 1963 Gibson ES 335 left-handed guitar. I think they told me it was worth at that time between 88 and $90,000. All the original parts of this guitar, and so they let me play that guitar for a considerable amount of time. And every time I went there, I saw that guitar, and that was my guitar. And I would just dream like maybe one day I can make enough money to, to purchase, acquire something like this. And shamelessly, I put a little cameo of myself playing that guitar near the end of the film, just so I can wink at that every time I watch the film. But I think it was that guitar. While we were filming Joe Bonamassa in New York, up in Long Island, we just so happened to run into one of Paul McCartney's left-handed Hofners, and so obviously that didn't make it into the film because that wasn't an original Songbirds guitar at that time. But I was able to snap a few photos of me playing that and stuff. And so, but as far as Songbirds collection guitars, it was that ES 335 that I was able to play several times. And I think that was eventually sold to a collector. And man, what I would do just get my hands back on that piece of wood.
So there's a lot of explanation as to what makes a guitar special, the craftsmanship. But when you pay, like, for those of us who don't play, what's the difference? I mean, you're a musician.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between a guitar you'd pull out of the room next door, or I think maybe see a guitar behind you? What's the difference between playing something at home and picking that guitar up?
So I have, with me, I have a Fender Strat, and it's not a vintage Strat. I've had it for about maybe 10 years. And it's just your standard, and it plays well. It plays good. It gets the job done for me when I'm just doodling around here at the home, and stuff. But when I pick up a 1963 guitar, there's a couple of factors that you can tell a difference in. The number one thing is the tone. It's like the tone is much more full. It's got a little bit more heft to it. It's it's just a bigger tone, a more authentic tone. And I think that goes just to the wood, the original wood that was made. And it's like guitars are like that, or hollow guitars like that are like a fine wine. The older they get, the better they sound. The more the wood ages, just the more beautiful that guitar is going to sound. And so I think that's a lot to do to it. Plus, they spent so much more time crafting those guitars, being intentional with the fingerboards and the frets. And so it's like the difference between sleeping on a firm mattress and a pillow top mattress. It's just so much more comfortable, which makes you, I think, a better player. And stuff. So I think it's a combination of, how it was constructed. Dave Davidson in the film, actually, if he ever listens to this, he's probably going to kill me for saying this and rebuke this. But he did say this. He says, if you decide you want to buy a Fender Stratocaster today, he would recommend buying a Mexican Strat that's cheaper than an American Strat. It's like, well, why? I'm going to buy American Strat. I don't want to buy a cheap, Mexican-made Strat. He says, no, buy a Mexican-made Strat, because the working conditions in the American assembly versus the Mexican assembly or factory warehouses are totally different. These people in Mexico who come and build these guitars love their job. They come in celebrating the fact they get to make guitars. They got music playing in there, and they give those guitars some love when they build those guitars, even though it's made from cheaper wood, but it's made with much more love than that you would get in an American factory, And so for me, that plays a lot to do with what I'm playing, is the love it's been given. Because I know if it's been given a lot of love, then just that much more attention to detail is going to be there. And that means a lot to me as a player.
This isn't really a spoiler per se, but the building now functions as a not-for-profit.
Yeah. So, this is not a spoiler at all. This is kind of the bittersweet part of our story, is that when they built the museum, at the same time, they created what they call the Songbirds Foundation. And essentially what the Songbirds Foundation is they take, for an example, if you donate $100 to the Songbirds Foundation, what that $100 does is it goes to put a guitar in the hands of a student, and it's their guitar, like it's theirs forever, acoustic guitar in the hands of a student, and it gives them 1 year worth of music lessons. It gives them all the tools and the curriculum they need to learn to play the guitar. That's what $100 does. So the Songbirds Foundation really fosters education and giving opportunities for children and young people to play who wouldn't get that in the school system. And so that's something that meant a lot to the founders of the museum, to be able to give back to the community. Now, just because the museum closed as a business didn't mean the Songbirds Foundation, the nonprofit, that didn't close, that kept going. And so they saw an opportunity. Okay, well, maybe we can just move into that space, and we can try to work out of that space since the museum's not going to be there anymore. And so in doing that, I think it was a total of maybe between 40 and 200 of the guitars. I mean, there were 1,200 guitars in that collection, but about 40 to 200 of them were actually donated to the Songbirds Foundation. So they said, okay, let's move in that space. Let's reopen it. Let's take a year. And so what they did is, after a year, maybe a year and a half, they reopened it. And it's called the Songbirds Foundation, but they have some of those guitars that were donated back on display there. They've got other things on display, like it's more educational things, like you can go in there and play a guitar, and it shows how the acoustics work. It's more of an educational
like a traditional museum, like,
yeah, and but they're back to having live shows there, and the sign's back on. The Songbird sign is back on, and you can go and see some live shows. The artists are coming back, and every dime that is made in that place through live shows, tours, if people rent it out, all that goes back into the Songbirds Foundation. And I think last year they served and we put the numbers in the film, I think maybe 3,500 kids got guitars. It's amazing what they're doing. So it's like they've taken up the mantle to do what they can with what they have to kind of get that place back open. But as far as the collection is concerned, that's documented in the film, that collection is gone, and unfortunately will never come back.
So it is bittersweet. The lights are on, good stuff is happening there, but it's not the same thing.
It's not. It's not. Unfortunately, it's not.
So Songbirds, again, is the documentary. It is a VOD, video on demand.
Mm-hmm.
I guess kind of dovetailing off what we just talked about, you're a documentarian.
Mm-hmm.
You saw a story, you found it. When is done? Like, were you finished with the movie before this popped up, before the foundation dropped in, and then you thought, oh, we got to keep going? Or like, how do you know when to walk away from telling a story?
I think we had about 5 different endings at one point, and it's like as the foundation progressed and what they were doing, we had to continually tweak our ending to kind of line up with them. And that was totally fine. That was totally fine, but it was frustrating at times. Like, you think you're done, you're submitting it to film festivals, and then we got to change the ending again, and just to reflect what they're doing and stuff. And so, but it's been an amazing process. It's been an amazing ride, like anybody who's an artist will understand, whether you're a musician in the studio or a filmmaker or a painter, at some point, you just have to stop and say, okay, this is it. I can keep tampering with it more. And honestly, we had enough footage. It's only a little over an hour long, the film.
Mm-hmm.
We could have done an hour and 30. We could have done an hour and 45, but I didn't want to put people to sleep. I wanted quality over quantity, and I wanted to be very well paced, and it ended up being just, I think, 61, 62 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's an easy watch. And I would just encourage anyone, you don't have to be a guitar nut. You don't have to have an extensive history of music to get anything out of this. In fact, I would argue I would go into this not knowing anything, and then that you're just that much more enlightened after you get through watching it, learning the stuff about our history when it comes to music, and hearing the stories of these people who connected. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the event that happened; it's about the relationships that were built within this place. And I really wanted the heart of this film to be about the relationships that were fostered and made. And I think we did a good job of communicating that. I hope we did. Mm-hmm. And stuff. So if you just love a good story, easy watch, check it out. We would love it. I would love it.
Well, if there's one thing you knew going into it, music creates community.
Exactly.
And that's seen in the movie. Again, it's Songbirds. It's a documentary. You can watch it. It is a very digestible 61 minutes. That's Showbiz 101, right? Leave them wanting more.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And no spoilers and no promises, but I mean, we got a lot more we're going to tell going forward. You know, there's still a lot more to unpack in the next few years. So there's more to be said, and we're excited about that.
well, I like what you said at the beginning of the call. You saw an opportunity to tell a story. Like,
Yeah.
it just sometimes you just people have that instinct and they know this is it. This is the moment. It's go time. We're doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. We may not have all the details, but there's something there. We need to do it. And it's better to do it and regret it and ask for forgiveness than regret not doing it at all. So,
100%. Well, really nice job on the movie, Dagan. And thank you for
thank you.
talking about it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's been an honor. I appreciate you making time for this.